So statistics show that the biggest challenge for women in leadership may not be the glass ceiling, but the broken ladder rung, meaning that women reach a certain level in their career and face obstacles to advance beyond that. What strategies do you use to surpass the broken rung? And what do you think needs to be done to repair it?
You know, early in my career in the late 90s, I worked for a garbage company, and predominantly male-driven, and I really wanted to one day run a garbage company. So I thought, well, how do I do that? I need to learn the business. So I would spend time with the controller's office. I dispatched trucks. At one point, I got a Class B license, and I drove a truck for a summer, a commercial front loader vehicle with a helper. And I was really determined to be a leader in this space and at a very young age. And more so because I was a woman in this man's world. I was always told, you'll do great in customer service. And that's an important role, but I felt like there's more to do than customer service. So what ended up happening is I didn't end up getting in any of those leadership roles at that time. I probably spent about 17 years in that industry, and I wasn't getting anywhere. So I left, did other things. And what I found later is when I started consulting, those same companies wanted to hire me. They're like, we can't afford you now in-house, so we need your consultation, we need your support. So what I would say is, you know, experience is key. Servant leadership for me was key, and opportunities came when I approached things in that very earnest way to try to break that ceiling or fix that rung, and finding obviously those mentors and sponsors along the way.
So what is new on the horizon with leadership in philanthropy in particular? And what are you seeing? Any initiatives that you're involved in that support women, children, families, equity, and what most excites you?
All right, well, what excites me is this broken rung concept. So I'm gonna go off script for just a second.
Go off script.
You know, I started out in the corporate sector for a little bit. For a hot second, I was in the music business, and then I ran screaming to the nonprofit sector. And, you know, for me, it was a place where I could find purpose, I could find positive change, and I could find inspiring women leaders to mentor me along the way. And what I'll say about this broken rung and the nonprofit sector overall, the sector is, you know, I think 75% of us in the sector, nonprofit sector, are female, right? So 77% actually. About 22% of those women are CEOs. That number goes up for organizations that are, you know, under $1 million, the hardest to run, the hardest to raise money for, doing some of the most connected work in community, and the lowest paying gigs, frankly, right? And the number, when you look at the overall arc of female leadership in the nonprofit sector, it goes way down for larger organizations. Organizations of 50 million or more, I think there are fewer than 20% of us at the head. So when I think about closing the leadership gap and fixing that rung, right, I think about 77% of us in the sector, we really need to lift up women in the sector. We really need to empower and pay women in the sector. And without that, we are not going to close the leadership gap, the, you know, pay gap, gender and racial equity gaps. So one of the things that inspired me at an early age were these strong women in the house, right? And there's a leader who inspired me also, and Shirley Chisholm. If you don't know her, look her up. Congresswoman, force for racial and gender equity in the last century and still inspires today. And what was the saying? If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And that was what the women in my house believed. And so we brought chairs for ourselves, we brought chairs for others, we brought chairs for our sisters, our brothers, everyone. But I think, you know, when I think about the folding chair, I'll share that the other day I was walking and, you know, spending my Saturday, my favorite Saturday, not at the beach, but actually this one was up in the mountains. And I saw someone with a shirt. It was a woman with a shirt and had Shirley's face on it. And underneath, scribbled in big yellow letters, was "Own the table."
Wow.
So when I think about the broken rung on the ladder, I think about, let's own the ladder. Let's buy that ladder. Let's invest in women business. Let's invest in women leaders. I could go on and on, but let's own the ladder. So I'll pass it on.
So under your leadership, the Dodgers Foundation is tackling homelessness, education, healthcare, social justice, really big, persistent challenges. What drives and inspires you to champion game-changing initiatives in Los Angeles? And what's the unique perspective that you think you bring to these challenges as a Black woman in sports?
The Dodgers Foundation, for those who are not aware, yes, we are tackling some of LA's most pressing problems. As you stated, homelessness, education, healthcare, and social justice. And truly, our work is around envisioning a city where every Angelino has an opportunity to thrive, which means that we're not only running programs, but we're funding programs that get at leveling the playing field for Los Angeles. And at the end of the day, we feel like if we use the Dodger brand to basically, and all the skills and all the strengths that come with that brand, to essentially lift up communities and provide basic necessities, that we will open up doors, access and opportunity for individuals, increase confidence, possibilities for the future, strengthen communities, and more. I tell you all that to tell you that's my story. And so what inspires me to do this work is the fact that I was the child that we serve. Ultimately, my family, I'm a first-generation American, first-generation college graduate, oldest girl in my family, 5 siblings, and just the sheer mentorship, the benefit from organizations that I received along the way, the financial support via scholarships, the doors that were opened for me are exactly what we aim to do for the youth that we serve here in Los Angeles every single year. Over the last 11 years, we've had the opportunity to provide $60 million in grants and in program investments, impacting about 280 unique nonprofits in the city. I do this work because every single day I wake up and I know, as a Black woman, there are young Black girls and boys and other young people of color in our city who are in very vulnerable communities and in very marginalized situations who are looking at me as their example. And I want people to know that this is possible, and I want people to know that this is possible because I tell my story and because my story is connected to our mission. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't take any of this for granted. I feel like I'm in a very special, privileged place with an amazing team to be able to do this work, but it really is because I'm extremely passionate, and I believe as a product of what is our mission today that this is possible.
Love that. So, of course, we have to ask, because as an alumna of the Crow Fellows Program in public affairs, you know that incorporating multiple perspectives is essential for effective leadership. Mayor Bass talked about that as well. What essential perspectives do women bring to elective office, and how do you think women lead or govern differently, if at all?
Well, it's hard to follow Mayor Bass, because she actually talked about a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about, so I'll try and say it in a slightly different way. You know, I think, so I'm a mom, I have 3 little kids, and so everything I do all day is informed by the fact that I have 3 little people who are dependent on me. And I think that it's made me much more patient in my job, and the job before that I had, which was a staff person to an elected, then Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. But I think the thing that I've noticed in this new job on the city council, and it's not universal, I mean, women are not a monolith, right? But we tend to not care as much who gets the credit. And that really matters. And once one of us starts to operate in that way, from a place of how do we solve this problem together, and who's the right person to carry this legislation, because maybe it's not me, maybe it's you, but we can help do some of the work if that would be helpful, and then hand it to you, and then people say, oh wow, okay. And then the culture of the place starts to change. And at first it felt like almost indistinguishable. It was subtle. But when I first decided to run, there were only 2 women out of 15 on the LA City Council, and a big part of why I wanted to run was because I thought that was insane. And you know, I'm the 2nd woman to hold the seat for the 5th council district in its 100 and whatever year history. And now there are 7 of us, 7 out of 15. And so yeah, it's good. I mean, we have 8 more to go, but we're getting there. And you know, the first woman mayor, who's a complete badass, she is such an inspiration to me, and she's been such an amazing mentor to me. And I like pinch myself every day that I get to wake up and go do this work with people like her. The first woman city attorney, 6 colleagues, many of whom are moms like me, and we don't care who gets the credit. And it's like the way we talk about policy making and problem solving, it's like what the mayor said. It's not about like, how do I use this to then like run for governor, but it's how do I use this to solve this problem that I came here to focus on? And you know, for her, she's focused on homelessness, which I am as well. But I got into the politics because I was interested in climate work. And so, which necessarily is collaborative. And so I think we don't care who gets the credit, not universally, because we're not a monolith, but, and we're collaborative because we know that none of us, we all have biggish staffs. I've got like 28 awesome people who show up and do amazing work. But when we bring all of our staffs together, there's so much more that we can do. And so we have conversations about like, you take this piece, I'll take that piece, and then we'll get together and talk about it. And then it's like when we come, it's not like this big public fight about who's going to get the credit, but it just happens. And so that's been wonderful, and I think it's really changed the culture of the place. I'll just, one quick thing, when I worked for Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, there were 5 women on the Board of Supervisors, an all-woman Board of Supervisors, the first time that had ever happened. And she asked me to go to City Hall to testify on something, and at the time there was only 1 woman out of 15, and the place just was like, you could feel it. It was so different. It felt different. And I think it's starting to feel more open and more collegial and more friendly. And I think we're more effective because of that.
Love that. That's awesome. So a question for all of you. So what's a professional space you've been in where you felt most powerful or most empowered? And who or what made it that way? And then where are any situations or scenarios where you've had to empower yourself?
2020, we were all obviously hit with the pandemic. And I felt like that was the moment in which I felt most powerful. In 2020, we were hit with the very, very national murder of George Floyd. And that was the moment that I felt even more powerful. The power came from leaders within our organization, the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation, but also within the broader Dodger franchise, giving me the authority and autonomy to lead in somewhat of an interim DEI role at that time, the organization through a really challenging time when we didn't have answers, and we didn't have answers within, and we didn't know what to do because so many people were suffering from the health injustices surrounding the pandemic, but also from just racial injustices surrounding our country and how they were being so amplified, et cetera. I often say that as a leader, a lot of my most powerful moments come from challenging times. Now, that's not easy by far, because they can also test you and put you in really tough situations mentally and physically, and they challenge work-life balance and all of those things. But I think that some of those situations allow you to really shine, and I think you hit on it when you said we show up in rooms and some of our women superpowers come out in ways that we didn't even know because they're inherently naturally in us. And people understand and accept them, and they change the whole landscape of what's happening. And I was just really proud, and I think powerful is a word where it needs to lead to something. And I think it's connected to a lot of how our organization moves forward and leads and things that we did as a result of that time period.
And my colleagues that are here today, we're so collaborative and we look out for each other. It is truly a family. And I think in that there's empowerment because you're looking out for each other. We're a safety-driven entity. Being at an airline, it is first and foremost for ourselves as our employees and my colleagues, but all of you that ride us and the other airlines as well. I mean, we lead with safety. And so I think, in that kind of a setting, that has the ability to create empowerment. We're fortunate too that we're given the leeway, go be disruptive, go lead in the space, make sure we're educating. Maria will know this because our leader, Janet Lampkin, is the chair now, and she and Maria work together hand in glove on a variety of issues that help support these kinds of concepts on, ensuring we're educating, but we're also, pushing the limits on how we can lead, particularly as women in leadership, having women like Janet, Maggie, and others, Tammy's. I mean, we have a whole crew of women in the LA region in particular, and it is very empowering just in that environment. I mean, our guys are great too, John. Thank you so much for hanging out. Our allies are very important. But, that having that just culture is, in itself, creates all kinds of really interesting, innovative opportunities.
I'll add to that or build on that.
Yeah.
I think for me, feeling most powerful is when I am true to my purpose and I'm true to my authentic self. And being in spaces and helping to create spaces where authenticity and inclusivity can thrive, not just exist, not check box, but thrive. I'll share at Parsons Foundation, and my former CEO is here, Wendy Guerin. She was a force in the sector, but she was a force internally as well. And for me, a tremendous mentor because she empowered me in spaces where I didn't yet have power, right? And we have, at Parsons Foundation, before I joined, Wendy had started a professional development program for nonprofit leaders. And I went to Wendy one day and said, hey, can we do more here? Can we really begin to build, capacity among sector leaders? And she said, go with it, run with it. And seeing my team, speaking of another moment of feeling powerful, seeing my team make the case to the board this past year to expand those programs. It's a pilot, so don't look too closely yet. But hopefully, someday, if you haven't done this program before and you're sitting in this room with one of your colleagues who has, maybe you'll be able to apply to Parsons Foundation, and we'll cover Natalie will talk, but we'll cover the costs for things like that, because we really need a nonprofit sector that promotes well-being of its people. So anyway, my team, my mentors, you all.
The times I've felt most empowered and have been most successful with that empowerment have been when people who I have deep respect for trust me and give me space to fail, but not so much space that I will actually fully fail. Just enough to see what I can do. When I was first deciding whether or not I was going to run for office, I did this program called Emerge. It trains Democratic women to run for office. And the very first lesson, this was January of 2020, so like right before COVID. It was the only time we managed to meet in person. The only thing I remember from that all-day session was when someone said, the most powerful thing you can do as a candidate and as an elected, or in any position of power really, is to just be your authentic self. It's like, and that was so liberating. It really was incredibly liberating, because when you run for office, you sort of like, it's like base jumping off a cliff and you hope the parachute opens, right? But any leadership role is really like that. But when you have, and for me, it's been mostly women mentors, and like this table right here that I was sitting at is just full of you. It's awesome. That trust from someone who you trust, placing their trust in you is the most empowering thing. And so what I try and do is I have a great team of people, and I try and empower them the same way that people like Sheila Kuehl or Mayor Bass empower me. And it's amazing what people do when you just tell them that you know that they can do it.
So we happen to have a panel of mothers, and we have to kind of dig into this conversation around the balance of personal and professional obligations. What are your strategies and approaches to caring for children, parents, loved ones, while also caring for the work you do and the issues you tackle and the teams that you are responsible for? What's your approach to that juggle?
There's this myth there's the myth of balance. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as balance. There's just not. I mean, balance is when you decide you're going to shift from this thing to that thing, and you're going to be present in whatever it is that you're doing in that moment, acknowledging that you will never get to do all of the things that you would like to do in either. I mean, I remember doing call time, and I was literally doing the dishes, and I was asking people for money, and people would say, "What's that in the background?" I say, "Oh, I'm doing the dishes," and they're like, they were like, "Well, I'm just going to give you some money." So you know, I think we're all so hard on ourselves as women, and we expect more of ourselves than anyone else really expects of us. And so what you do is you surround yourself with the best people you possibly can. You hire for excellence. You hire people who know more than you do. And then you empower them to do the job so that you can go read stories to your kids at night and put them to bed. And then you're present for bedtime, and then you get back to it. And you carve out time to exercise or whatever self-care looks like for you. For me today, it was eating 4 bread rolls. You know, and you grace and forgiveness, and you keep your woman friends because they keep you grounded and tethered, and that's it.
I think it's ditto all of that. And it's this version of integration for me. I have to bring my family, my husband, my kids, my extended family along. How to figure out how those work and life go together is like just really important, and it's the only way. The art of multitasking, I didn't realize that I could do 50 things at one time, but I can.
Well,
I don't know how it happens. I think it's also another one of our superpowers, but it's just figuring it out and keeping up. For myself and some of my best friends now, right, we're in the midst of raising kids going off to college, all of those transitions, but also taking care of parents. And not even 2 years ago, because I've lost track of time, in 2019, I'm originally from the East Coast. I've been in Los Angeles 22 years. My mom had a heart attack back east. I happened to be back east. I came back here, made preparations, and essentially moved her to Los Angeles with my sister and my 2 nephews, one of who has autism, because that's what I saw as integration and the only way that I could be doing this work and life thing. And so to be a support to my parents, whether that's back in, I'll be back in New York. My team knows last year I spent a whole lot of time in hospitals, but in ICU, on the conference call, on the Zoom off camera, just making it work, which sounds crazy, but I feel like integration has been the only way and the only settling way for me. I want to be a part of like all of it all the time, so part of it's my problem, but I think that the integration where they all just come together, I'm fortunate to have done for 11 years this role where having a 21-year-old and a 15-year-old boy who I've been able to bring along with me. There were moments they were at Dodger Stadium just sitting on the floor outside my office or shooting baskets with my coworkers, just figuring out their lives while I was doing my thing. I think they're better for it. In an interesting way, I always worried about the guilty parent thing and how I was going to just ruin them, and I think they're 2 brilliant, amazing human beings. Yeah.
Love it. I think once you let go of guilt, and you embrace the opportunity and the exposure that you can get when you're at Target and you've got the kids and you're on that conference call off camera and loading the car, and then you're chiming in when you need to and doing everything that we have to do, you can't have guilt, because then you don't get to see what's out there in the landscape, and it doesn't, I always think of everything like a game. You want to slow the game down so that you can see the strategic opportunities and leverage them. But when you are clouded with guilt, or, I think guilt is the biggest thing that we suffer from in this particular dynamic. When you can let go of that energy that you have within you, you just start seeing everything so differently.
Guilt can be heavy, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Grace, integration, guilt, we carry all of these things with us, right? And for me, I can remember, and Wendy, I'm going to call you out again. I can remember with, an elementary and a middle school child situation at home, and this job at Parsons, and flying up and down from, LA to Oregon. My mom was in Southern Oregon. My dad was up in tribal communities in Oregon and Washington, stepdad. And sitting in, can't even go to this topic of conversation, but I was sitting in Indian Health Services trying to get culturally competent care for Dad, and calling Wendy because we had a docket deadline. And Wendy was like, just send me what you got. Just send me what you got. I'll help you finish it. And of course I sat there and finished it and sent it off to her. And then she fixed it and made it better. And it was funded, so that was good. But what I'll say about that is that Wendy shared with me at that time, I said to her, I need flex time, not FaceTime right now. And Wendy said, that's great. And this is before COVID, this is before Zoom. She gave me that space and that grace to live an integrated life with a little less guilt. Trying to pull all these threads together here. And it meant a lot. And so for me, I think bringing those things to my team and my workplace, and I always felt that if we can bring an integrated self to our work and into our home, I don't know how my kids are going to feel. I still think I'm going to screw them up, and they're 19 and 22. But I think if we can provide that same grace to our work cultures, mothers, uncles, aunties, dads, people with, multiple life needs, I think we're going to all be better for it.
Good. So. What do you do for self-care?
Look at they're all I mean, I can go first, but you're not going to like it. I haven't figured it out. I've been in this job for 15 months or so, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Yeah. I don't know. Routine is good. Breaks are good. Friends are good. But there's no time for everything. So I think it's more like the daily practice of just trying not to feel guilty. My kids are young. My oldest is 9, my youngest is 3, and there's a 5-year-old in the middle. And they guilt me all the time. If I'm gone one night of the week, you're always gone. Why are you always gone? Why can't you find a job where you're home more? I mean, I was a lawyer before, so I'd probably be gone much more if I weren't the boss, right? So I think it's not internalizing the guilt that I'm getting from them, and it's back to grace. It's like you just forgive yourself, and because you can exercise 2 or 3 times a week. You can not do morning meetings every day before council. Start a little later 1 day a week. Have a weekend with girlfriends every year, whatever. But I think it's like the day-to-day, like, how are you being kind to yourself? Like, so for me, sometimes it's after my husband takes the kids to school, I'll sit and I'll have a second cup of coffee by myself in a quiet house. And that's like the best self-care I can do. Now, I could get on a spin bike and I could do a spin class, which I probably should do because of the bread. But sometimes it's just sitting and having a cup, or calling my mom. My stepdad just passed away, so I call my mom. So it's like we're pulled in so many different directions, and I think it's being present for whatever needs to happen, and that's often just like sitting with yourself quietly for a minute and being like, what do I need to do right now to be okay? And so I think that requires quiet.
I definitely feel like people don't talk often enough about how hard self-care is with young kids. Yeah. I just remember that being such a struggle because there is a different level of guilt and there is a different everything.
Well, and they're sick all the time, so
yes.
You're sick all the time. So how do you exercise when you're sick all the time?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
And then you carry that in different forms for the rest of the time, no matter what age they are. I don't do a good job of it on a daily basis, do a terrible job of it on a daily basis. But I've figured out how to create some intentional spaces. And I honestly think when we sent my son off to school 2 years ago, I just said to myself, I was not going to replace what I have to do for him on a daily basis with something that I'm doing for my husband or the other boy. So I very smart. That was the only room I could find. And so Saturday nights with my husband is reserved for date night. That's self-care for me. I enjoy eating out. I enjoy new restaurants. I love that. Vacationing around the world with my girlfriends is self-care for me. And I want to do it every quarter. It doesn't necessarily happen every quarter, but we're trying. That space is extremely sacred to me. Walking the Strand in Manhattan Beach on Sunday morning is extremely sacred to me. And so being able to do that, and then it's like the simple things, just laying in my 15-year-old's bed while he's playing video games and listening to him and his friends talk trash and just being all up in his business is so cool for me, and I feel like that's safe. And FaceTiming with my boys, sometimes you have to find the most simplest of things that take you away from it, if that makes sense, because I don't always have the time to be as intentional and as, let me create this entire self-care routine, if you will.
I like to think of it of dropping little anchors everywhere. Doesn't have to be a big thing, but those little anchors consistently pay dividends.
But you do really have to give permission and then celebrate that permission that you've given yourself so that you do it again and again and again. And then that translates into other things that you do.
I do really try to, now that both of my children are out of the house, and I did start to fill things up with stuff that I was taking care of around the house for my husband and my siblings and all that stuff.
Call Nicole.
Lots of laundry, extra stuff. But I really do try to, I meditate on a daily basis, and I miss a few. But if I miss, I then am connected enough to my practice that if I just need to, in a 3-minute moment, in a bathroom stall, in my office chair, in my car, which I know runs antithetical to advice on meditation, I keep my eyes open. It helps. It helps to just remember that even 3 minutes, if you don't have 30 minutes or you don't have an hour for a walk, which is my best meditation, is walking. Grab it where you can. Little anchors. I actually really like that.
One more question for all of you, because I want to really touch on this theme around mentorship and sponsorship. When we talk a lot about it in the Women in Leadership program, we see how essential it is in our careers and our work. What in your mind makes for a great mentor sponsor, and what makes for a great mentee in that sense as well? What are your thoughts?
But for me, I'd like to build on what Mayor Bass said. For me, mentors are everywhere, and they are in everyone. And I was really pleased when I was looking at the Coro website, and I'm going to not get this right, but it says leadership is in everyone and everywhere, or something like that, to that effect. I feel that that's the case with mentors. Mentors for me and my opportunity to share my mentorship with somebody else. And so what makes a good mentor or mentee or sponsor, sponsee? Curiosity, listening, engagement, and being open to the fact that we're all here for each other and we're all ready to learn from one another, right? So that's my take on it.
On March 26th, we celebrated the life of my mentor of 20 plus years. Wow. I'm gonna try not to be emotional. And so it was a really great time for me to reflect on what I think is amazing mentor, because no one has provided for me in my life what this man provided for me. And when I boil it down, it's really that he challenged me to be my best self and didn't just tell me flowery things, gave me the sheer guts, frankly, to even sit in this seat right now, and just consistently was my champion. I think as women, it's so important for us to have mentors in so many different spaces, but to have a man esteemed, just so well celebrated in his own right, always celebrating me in so many ways, I think I was just extremely grateful for that, but I loved that he is the reason why I've taken so many risks and transitioned to so many places and challenged myself and continue to challenge myself. We almost fought, but it was the best kind of fighting, because I'd walk away oh, he's right. I didn't think about that. I should have done that, or no, that wasn't the right thing to do. But it was this sense of somebody who helps you stand up for yourself. And there's so many ways we can look at mentorship, and it can be nice and just very, this feels good. Sometimes it felt uncomfortable, and I think that was really important as well.
What, can you share personal experiences around either being a mentor or being mentored yourselves? Where have there been moments that have been kind of trajectory shifting for you based on the support of someone else?
I never wanted to run for office. It was not something that I'd ever thought. I'm an introvert, really, truly. I loved being a staff person. I loved doing climate policy work. I loved being one step removed from being in newspapers and on being interviewed. But my then boss, Sheila Kuehl, decided that I should run for office. And we had weekly check-ins where we'd talk about the work that we were doing. And 2 years in or something, she was like, "So how do you feel about running for office?" And I was like, "Well, that's super flattering, because you're kind of my hero." And but no. But thank you, but no. And she just kept, every week it was like she was on a mission. And like 6 years in, we got this, I mean, maybe not every week, but you know, it was like a drumbeat. And I worked on and developed this thing that became Measure W. It was adopted by LA County voters in 2016 to basically green Los Angeles, create local water, create new parks. And I led it. She let me lead it. And after that passed, it was adopted with almost 70% of the vote. She's like, okay, so how about now? And I realized how much good you could do with government after that experience. And so I decided, well, why not? I mean, what else? She's retiring. What else am I going to do? Sure, okay. And you know, I think having someone like that who is, I would say, one of the most consequential local electeds in California's history. I mean, she's the first openly gay member of the state legislature. She brought single payer to the governor's desk twice in the 90s and the aughts, and the only reason we don't have single payer is because 2 governors vetoed it. I mean, gay marriage, all sorts of everything. She's done everything. To have someone like that say, you should do this, you'd be good at this. That is literally the only reason I'm here. And so for me, having a mentor who I had such deep respect for say, you should do this. That is why I'm sitting here right now. And so when she retired and I was coming onto the council and I had breakfast with Mayor Bass, she said, so how can I help you? I said, well, I need a new mentor. So you're going to be it. You know, you've got lots of mentees, but I'm just telling you, and most, you know, I was like trying to be cool, but I couldn't be cool. And so I just said, like, I want you to be my mentor and I want to learn from you. And it's been incredible.
Wow.
Awesome. And there are other people too that I learn from. I try and learn from whoever I'm in a space with. But nobody does a press conference like she does. Nobody talks from the heart and gets shit done the way she does. And so I'm constantly like, I have mentors in my personal life and I have mentors in my professional life. And but that sort of 6-year role by Supervisor Kuehl is, I would think, the most consequential mentorship relationship I've had.
Wow, I love that story. Thank you for sharing.
You know, Mayor Bass really did say it best. I mean, I feel like every interaction is a potential for being mentored or having an opportunity to mentor, or even sponsor. Like in a conversation, all of a sudden you're like, can we follow up and just offline about this one thing? Because you said something, I want to learn more. You sparked this interest in me. And then all of a sudden it turns into a friendship and something so much more meaningful. So if I think you approach life in that way, that anybody that you talk to is that potential mentor or mentee, that you can be that person for that individual, it makes just life that much more rich and amazing. And we have an obligation to pull each other up. That has to happen. So that is the only way that it'll get done, is if we just conduct ourselves in that way.
Yes. What are you most optimistic about when you think about the future of women in leadership? Poppy, I'll come to you first.
Woman president.
Mike.
More safe spaces in rooms like this, where we're actually having conversation. I'm optimistic about table 29 that doesn't have their number up, but the women of the Dodgers Foundation, and the leaders that I know they are and will become, and organizations like Coro that are continuing to lift us all up and give people an opportunity to grow into the woman they can be.
Yeah, I'll just say Coro. I'm a huge Coro proponent. And I think, look, I just want to say Natalie Samardzian is the best thing that's happened to Coro in like 40 years. Truly.
I mean, here for Natalie, here for Coro. For me, you know, the women who came before, the women who collaborate with me on a day-to-day basis and work shoulder to shoulder to make the world a better place, and all the women who are coming ahead. And men, I see some male faces out there, but really Coro and Natalie, thank you for your leadership and thank you for making this world a better place.
So we have a wonderful audience here. What's one challenge that you put forth to all of them with the women, the allies? What do we do now to move women in leadership forward?
Oh, and the ladder.
find the least likely person to mentor so that you can diversify more spaces?
I would say like mass manufacture the ladder. Like let's figure out how to, because there shouldn't just be one. I mean, there should be lots of them. And I think we are our own best allies. And I don't know, when there's a room full of women, I always learn a lot. So thank you for creating this space.
Please join me in thanking the panel for offering with such care and candor in this conversation. Thank you.